Maria wiped the tears from her 8-year-old son Diego's cheek as they sat on the cold steps of the apartment building. Their suitcases lay scattered around them, everything they owned in the world. The locks had been changed again, and this time there was no going back. It had been 3 years since Maria's husband, Carlos, died in a car accident. 3 years of living with his family, hoping they would accept her and Diego as their own. Instead, each day brought new cruelty, new ways to remind them they were unwanted burdens. "Mama, where will we sleep tonight?" Diego asked, his small voice trembling. Maria pulled him closer, feeling his thin body shiver against the evening cold. She had exactly $17 in her purse and nowhere to go. The trouble had started the moment Carlos was buried. His mother, Elena, had made it clear that Maria was no longer welcome in the family. "You trapped my son with this child," Elena would hiss when no one else was around. "Now that he's gone, you mean nothing to us." Carlos's brother Miguel was even worse. He would corner Maria in the kitchen, demanding she hand over Carlos's life insurance money. When she refused, explaining it was saved for Diego's education, Miguel's face would turn red with rage. "That money belongs to this family, not some outsider," he would shout. The beatings started small. A shove here, a slap there when Diego made too much noise or when Maria didn't cook dinner exactly how Elena liked it. Maria endured it all, thinking of Diego's need for stability, for a roof over his head. She worked double shifts at the diner, coming home exhausted to find more chores waiting and more criticism about her failures as a wife and mother. Last week, everything escalated. Miguel had been drinking and started yelling about the insurance money again. When Maria stood her ground, he grabbed her arm so hard it left purple bruises. Diego had run into the room, crying and begging Miguel to stop hurting his mama. Miguel turned his anger on the little boy, striking him across the face hard enough to split his lip. That night, Maria made her decision. She quietly packed their few belongings while the family slept, but Elena caught them trying to leave. The older woman's eyes blazed with hatred as she called Maria every cruel name she could think of. "Take your bastard child and get out of my house," Elena screamed. "You'll never survive without us. You'll be begging on the streets within a week." Now, sitting on those cold steps, Maria wondered if Elena might be right. She had no family of her own, no friends who could help. Her parents had died when she was young, and she had no siblings. Carlos had been her whole world, and when he died, that world crumbled. A gentle rain began to fall, and Maria knew they had to find shelter. She picked up their suitcases and took Diego's hand, walking toward the bus station. Maybe they could sit there for a few hours, figure out what to do next. The bus station was crowded and noisy, filled with travelers and homeless people seeking refuge from the rain. Maria found an empty bench in the corner and spread Diego's jacket over him as he curled up beside her. She watched him sleep, his face still swollen from Miguel's blow, and felt her heart breaking. "Excuse me, miss." A security guard approached them around midnight. "You can't sleep here. Station policy." Maria's cheeks burned with embarrassment as other people stared at them. She gently shook Diego awake and gathered their things again. Outside, the rain had turned into a downpour. They walked the empty streets for hours, ducking under store awnings when the rain became too heavy. Diego never complained, though Maria could see his exhaustion in every step. They finally found a 24-hour laundromat that was warm and dry. The elderly attendant, a kind woman named Rosa, noticed them immediately. "Honey, what are you doing out here with that baby in this weather?" she asked in accented English. Maria's carefully held composure finally cracked. Through tears, she told Rosa about Carlos's death, about the abuse from his family, about having nowhere to go. Rosa listened with growing anger and sadness. "Those people, they have no heart," Rosa said, shaking her head. "A mother and child should never be treated this way." She disappeared into a back room and returned with blankets and 2 cups of hot chocolate. "You can stay here tonight," Rosa whispered, glancing toward the front windows. "But you have to leave before my boss comes in the morning." As Diego slept peacefully for the first time in days, wrapped in Rosa's warm blankets, Maria stared at the washing machines spinning endless cycles. She thought about her life with Carlos, how happy they had been in their tiny apartment before Diego was born. Carlos had been everything his family was not: gentle, kind, loving. He would be heartbroken to see how they were treating his wife and son. In the morning, Rosa brought them coffee and donuts from the shop next door. "I know a place," she said quietly. "A shelter for mothers and children. It's not fancy, but they'll help you get back on your feet." The shelter was in a converted church basement, filled with beds separated by thin curtains. The other women there had stories similar to Maria's: abuse, abandonment, nowhere else to turn. The director, a stern but caring woman named Sister Margaret, explained the rules and requirements. "You can stay for 30 days, Sister Margaret said. "In that time, we'll help you find work, get Diego enrolled in school, and save enough money for an apartment deposit. But you have to follow our program, attend our job training sessions, and contribute to the community here." Maria agreed to everything. For the first time in months, Diego smiled as he played with the other children in the shelter's small recreation room. That night, lying on the narrow cot with Diego curled against her side, Maria made a promise to herself and to her sleeping son. She would rebuild their lives from nothing if she had to. She would prove Elena wrong. She would show Diego that his mother was strong enough to protect him and give him the future he deserved. Carlos's family had tried to break her spirit, but they had failed. Tomorrow would be the first day of their new life, and Maria was ready to fight for it. 3 weeks at the shelter had given Maria new hope. Diego was thriving in his new school, making friends and laughing again. Maria had completed the job training program and landed a position at a small accounting office downtown. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady work with the possibility of advancement. Sister Margaret had helped her apply for low-income housing, and they were on several waiting lists. "It might take months," the nun had warned, "but we'll find you something." Maria didn't mind waiting. For the first time since Carlos's death, she felt like she was moving forward instead of just surviving. She had even started saving a small emergency fund, putting away every extra dollar she could manage. The job at Henderson & Associates was challenging but rewarding. Mr. Henderson, the elderly owner, had taken a chance on Maria despite her limited work experience. "You have an honest face," he had said during her interview, "and Sister Margaret speaks very highly of your character." Maria threw herself into the work, staying late to learn new software programs and double-checking every report she prepared. Her co-workers, especially Sarah, the office manager, had become friendly and supportive. "You're catching on faster than anyone we've hired in years," Sarah told her one afternoon. Diego was adjusting well to his new school. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had pulled Maria aside during parent conferences to praise his resilience and positive attitude. "He's been through so much," she said, "but he never gives up. That comes from you, you know. Children learn strength from their parents." But their peaceful routine was shattered one Friday afternoon when Maria picked Diego up from school. A black sedan was parked outside their building, and Maria's blood ran cold when she recognized Miguel behind the wheel. "Keep walking," she whispered to Diego, pulling him past their usual entrance. They ducked into a nearby coffee shop and waited, watching through the window as Miguel finally drove away after an hour. "Was that Uncle Miguel?" Diego asked, his voice small and frightened. Maria nodded, her mind racing. How had they found her? She had been so careful not to leave any trail. That night at the shelter, Sister Margaret called Maria into her office. "I received a disturbing phone call today. she said, her expression grave. Someone claiming to be Diego's grandfather called, demanding to know where you were staying. They said they had legal rights to the boy. Maria felt sick. Carlos's father had never shown interest in Diego when they lived with the family. This had to be Elena's doing, probably hoping to get control of Diego and the insurance money she believed should belong to them. I told them nothing, of course, Sister Margaret continued. But Maria, you need to be prepared. If they try to take legal action, you'll need a lawyer. The next few days were tense. Maria constantly looked over her shoulder, afraid Miguel would appear again. She had Diego wait inside the school building until she could pick him up directly at the door. At work, she jumped every time the phone rang, worried it would be Carlos's family making threats. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Maria was walking Diego home from school when a homeless man stumbled into the crosswalk ahead of them, directly into the path of an oncoming delivery truck. Without thinking, Maria dropped Diego's hand and ran forward, pulling the man back onto the sidewalk just as the truck roared past. The man was disoriented and smelled of alcohol, but he wasn't hurt. "Thank you," he mumbled, looking up at Maria with bleary eyes. "You saved my life." A crowd had gathered, and someone called an ambulance to check on the homeless man. Maria was giving her statement to the police when a well-dressed man in an expensive suit approached her. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I'm Robert Sterling. I saw what you did back there." He handed her a business card that read, Sterling Industries, CEO. Maria looked at the card in confusion. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "That man you saved," Robert continued, "his name is Tommy. He's been homeless for 3 years, ever since he lost his job and couldn't afford his medication for mental illness. Most people cross the street to avoid him. You risked your own safety to save his life." Diego had been standing quietly beside Maria, still shaken by what had happened. Robert knelt down to the boy's level. "You must be very proud of your mother," he said gently. "She's a hero." "She's the best mama in the world," Diego said solemnly, making Robert smile. "I can see that." Robert stood up, turning back to Maria. "Mrs. Rodriguez. Maria Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'd like to help you and Diego. I don't know your situation, but something tells me you could use a friend." Maria was suspicious. She had learned to be wary of strangers offering help. "That's very kind, but we're fine," she said carefully. Robert nodded understandingly. "Of course you are. But would you consider having coffee with me tomorrow? Just coffee. Somewhere public. I'd like to hear your story if you're willing to share it." Something in his voice convinced Maria that his offer was genuine. Against her better judgment, she agreed to meet him at the coffee shop near Diego's school. The next day, Maria found herself sitting across from one of the city's most successful businessmen, telling him about Carlos's death, the abuse from his family, and their current struggles. Robert listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "I lost my wife 5 years ago," Robert said quietly when Maria finished. "Cancer. We never had children, but I can imagine how devastating it would be to face that kind of loss and then be rejected by family." He paused, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "What if I told you I could offer you a job? A real job? With benefits and a future?" Maria's heart leaped, but she forced herself to remain cautious. "Doing what?" "My personal assistant quit last month. The job involves managing my schedule, handling correspondence, organizing my charitable foundation's events. It requires someone trustworthy, organized, and intelligent. Someone who understands what it means to work hard and never give up." The salary he mentioned was 3 times what Maria was making at the accounting firm. It would mean Diego could have his own room, good schools, a stable future. But it seemed too good to be true. "Why me?" Maria asked. "You don't even know me." Robert leaned forward, his eyes serious. Because yesterday, I watched you risk everything to save someone most people would ignore. Because you've survived losing your husband and being cast out by his family, yet you've managed to rebuild your life and raise a son who clearly adores you. Those aren't qualities you can teach, Mrs. Rodriguez. Those come from character. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. I need to think about it. Of course. Robert handed her another business card. Take all the time you need. But Maria, let me ask you something. What would your husband want for you and Diego? That evening, Maria sat in the shelter's small chapel, thinking about Carlos. She could almost hear his voice encouraging her to take the chance, to trust in the kindness of a stranger who seemed to see something worthwhile in her. Maybe it was time to stop just surviving and start truly living again. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she signed the employment contract in Robert Sterling's office. The view from the 40th floor was breathtaking, overlooking the entire city where she and Diego had struggled just to survive. Now, impossibly, she was about to become the personal assistant to one of its most influential businessmen. Welcome to Sterling Industries, Robert said with a warm smile. Janet will show you to your office and help you get settled. The office was larger than the entire room she and Diego shared at the shelter. Maria had a mahogany desk, her own computer, and a window view that made her feel like she was on top of the world. Janet, Robert's departing assistant, spent the morning explaining the job responsibilities and introducing Maria to the staff. Mr. Sterling is different from other wealthy executives, Janet confided during lunch. He actually cares about people. You'll see what I mean. Within her first week, Maria understood what Janet meant. Robert's calendar was filled with charity meetings, foundation events, and visits to community programs. He donated millions to homeless shelters, children's hospitals, and education initiatives, but he did it quietly, without seeking publicity. Money is just a tool, Robert explained when Maria asked about his philanthropy. The question is whether you use that tool to build something meaningful or just accumulate more tools. Diego was thriving in his new environment. Robert had helped Maria find a beautiful apartment in a safe neighborhood with excellent schools. For the first time in his young life, Diego had his own room, decorated with posters of his favorite superheroes and shelves full of new books. "Mama, look!" Diego called one evening as Maria arrived home from work. He was sitting at the kitchen table working on homework with the help of Mrs. Chen, the elderly babysitter Robert had recommended. "I got an A on my math test." Maria hugged her son tightly, remembering the nights at the shelter when she had helped him with homework by the dim light of the recreation room. Those days seemed like a lifetime ago. But their newfound happiness was threatened when Carlos's family discovered where they were living. Elena called Maria's office one afternoon, her voice venomous with rage. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Elena hissed into the phone. "Playing the victim, getting some rich man to feel sorry for you. But that money you're hiding belongs to our family, and we're going to get it." "There is no hidden money," Maria replied firmly. "Carlos's insurance went into a college fund for Diego. That's where it's staying." "We'll see about that," Elena threatened. "Miguel is talking to lawyers. We're going to prove you're an unfit mother. We'll take Diego away from you and get what's rightfully ours." The call left Maria shaken. That evening, she confided in Robert about the threat. His expression grew serious as she explained about the insurance money and Elena's determination to get control of it. "How much money are we talking about?" Robert asked. $50,000, Maria said. "It's not a fortune, but to them it represents everything they lost when Carlos died." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Maria, I need you to gather every document you have about Carlos's death, his insurance policy, and your marriage certificate. Tomorrow, we're going to see my lawyer." David Patterson, Robert's attorney, was a sharp-eyed man who specialized in family law. After reviewing Maria's documents, he was confident about her legal position. Your husband named you as the beneficiary, and you're Diego's legal mother, he explained. They have no claim to the insurance money. However, they could try to challenge your custody of Diego if they can prove neglect or unfitness. But that's ridiculous, Maria protested. Diego is healthy, happy, doing well in school. I agree, David said. But these cases can be expensive and emotionally draining. Let me make some calls and see what we're dealing with. 2 days later, David called with disturbing news. Miguel had indeed hired a lawyer and was preparing to file for custody of Diego, claiming that Maria was emotionally unstable and unable to provide properly for the child. They planned to use her homelessness and time in the shelter as evidence of unfitness. It's a weak case, David assured her, but they're hoping you'll settle out of court and give them access to the insurance money rather than fight. That evening, Maria sat in her beautiful apartment, watching Diego play with his new toys, and felt the familiar fear creeping back. She had worked so hard to build this new life, but it could all be destroyed by the greed and hatred of Carlos's family. Robert found her crying in her office the next morning. Without a word, he sat down across from her desk and waited for her to compose herself. I can't afford a court battle, Maria said finally. Even if I win, the legal fees will bankrupt me. Maybe I should just give them some of the money and hope they leave us alone. No, Robert said firmly. Giving in to blackmail never works. They'll just come back for more. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Maria, I want to make you an offer. Let me pay for your legal defense. Consider it an advance against your salary if that makes you more comfortable. Maria stared at him in shock. Robert, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. His voice was gentle but determined. I told you before that character can't be taught. You've shown me more courage and integrity in the past month than I've seen in years of dealing with wealthy, educated people who should know better. The court hearing was scheduled for the following month. David worked tirelessly to prepare Maria's case, gathering testimonials from Diego's teacher, documentation of Maria's job performance, and medical records showing Diego's excellent health and development. Sister Margaret agreed to testify about Maria's time at the shelter, describing her dedication to Diego and her determination to rebuild their lives. Mrs. Chen offered to speak about Diego's behavior and happiness in their current home. Meanwhile, Robert quietly investigated Miguel's background. What he found was devastating to the family's case. Miguel had a history of domestic violence charges, had been fired from multiple jobs for drinking, and was currently facing eviction from his apartment for non-payment of rent. This isn't about Diego's welfare, David explained to the judge during the hearing. This is about money. The petitioners are facing financial difficulties and see the child's insurance inheritance as a solution to their problems. Elena and Miguel's lawyer had built their case around Maria's period of homelessness, claiming it showed she was incapable of providing stability. But when Sister Margaret took the stand, her testimony was powerful. I've worked with homeless families for 20 years, the nun said firmly. Maria Rodriguez is one of the strongest, most devoted mothers I've ever encountered. She chose to leave an abusive household to protect her son, even though it meant sacrificing their housing. That's not poor judgment, that's heroism. Mrs. Patterson, Diego's teacher, testified about his academic progress and emotional well-being. Diego is thriving, she told the judge. He's confident, happy, and clearly feels secure in his mother's love. These are not the characteristics of a child in an unstable home. When Diego himself was briefly questioned by the judge, his words were simple but devastating to Miguel's case. I want to stay with my mama, he said clearly. She takes good care of me. Uncle Miguel scared me when he hit me. The judge's decision was swift and decisive. The petitioners have failed to demonstrate any evidence of neglect or unfitness. Their claims appear to be financially motivated rather than focused on the child's best interests. Custody remains with the mother, and I'm issuing a restraining order preventing further harassment of this family. Outside the courthouse, Maria hugged Diego tightly while Robert and David looked on with satisfaction. Elena and Miguel walked away in defeat, their lawyer having abandoned them when their true motives became clear. "It's over," Robert said quietly. "They can't touch you or Diego anymore." 6 months later, Maria stood in Robert's office, looking out at the city lights as they celebrated the success of the Sterling Foundation's latest charity drive. She had organized the entire event, raising over $2 million for homeless families. "I have something to tell you," Robert said, joining her at the window. "The foundation board voted today. They want you to become the executive director." Maria turned to him in amazement. "Robert, I don't have the experience for something like that." "You have something better than experience," he replied. "You have the heart for it. You understand what these families are going through because you've been there yourself." Diego burst into the office, having finished his homework in the conference room where Maria often brought him after school. At 10 years old, he was tall for his age, confident and bright, showing no signs of the trauma he had endured. "Mama, can we go home now?" he asked, hugging her waist. "Mrs. Chen is making my favorite dinner tonight." As they walked toward the elevator, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 3 years ago, she had been broken and defeated, sitting on cold concrete steps with nowhere to go. Tonight, she was the director of a major charitable foundation, living in a beautiful home with her son, surrounded by people who respected and cared for her. "Thank you," she said quietly to Robert as the elevator descended. "For what?" "For seeing something in us worth saving." Robert smiled, watching Diego press all the elevator buttons with the enthusiasm of a child who felt safe and loved. "Maria, I didn't save you. You saved yourselves. I just had the privilege of watching it happen." The elevator doors opened to reveal the lobby of Sterling Industries, where Maria's journey from desperation to hope had begun with a simple act of kindness toward a stranger. Now, as they walked out into the evening air, she knew that her story was proof that sometimes, when everything seems lost, life has a way of bringing exactly the right person at exactly the right time. Diego slipped his hand into hers as they walked toward their car. Chattering excitedly about his upcoming school play and weekend plans with friends. Maria listened to his happy voice and smiled, knowing that Carlos would be proud of the life they had built from the ashes of their old one. Their story was no longer about survival. It was about triumph, hope, and the incredible power of human kindness to transform lives.